Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with a news item on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of The Hindu. I had prepared a 10-minute discussion on this newspaper article as well as the editorial on the same matter yesterday itself. There were 2 to 3 very important issues you could draw from the political developments in Maharashtra. Now all that is irrelevant. There is a political coup in Maharashtra. Devendra Fadnavis is sworn in as the Chief Minister of the state for the second consecutive term. Ajit Pawar, nephew of Sharad Pawar, is now the Deputy Chief Minister. Few quick points. Number 1, don't accuse BJP of opportunism. The other side was also being opportunistic. My only worry is, through such methods, people's faith in democracy might well get eroded. Because clearly, if you look at this entire controversy, if the people voted for the BJP Shiv Sena government and then Shiv Sena does not honor the mandate, it breaks people's faith in the electoral system. That's number 1. Number 2, 3 parties, NCP, Shiv Sena and the Indian National Congress. It was going to be an opportunistic political alliance because there was no common ideology. When people voted against the Congress-NCP alliance, why should they be part of the government? And then the BJP breaking parties, forming government. What about the corruption cases against Ajit Pawar? What about the acronym Prime Minister used against NCP, calling it Naturally Corrupt Party? People watching all this may not be pleased. But let's leave it here, not relevant for the exam except for a few points. Point number 1, there was President's rule in Maharashtra, which was revoked today 5:47 a.m. according to the news reports. You just need to remember that President's rule can be imposed and revoked by the President at any point in time. But President's rule is imposed by the President on the advice of the Cabinet. And then it can be revoked also by the President only on the advice of the Cabinet, because President cannot act on his own. President, according to the Constitution of India, has to act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. The question is, when was Cabinet meeting convened by the Prime Minister when the recommendation for the revocation of President's rule was sent to the President? Maybe tomorrow, if newspaper articles focus on this issue, maybe tomorrow we will have the answer to this. And the government of Maharashtra will now have to prove its majority on the floor of the Legislative Assembly. So that means this newspaper article as well as the editorial in today's The Hindu newspaper is irrelevant. Let's look at another news on page number 1. Supreme Court in its Aadhaar judgment had allowed the use of Aadhaar. But Supreme Court had said Aadhaar cannot be used by private entities. Supreme Court also had struck down a clause in the Aadhaar Act that allowed the use of Aadhaar by private companies such as the banks and the telecom operators. But then, despite the Supreme Court order, Parliament passed 2 laws, Aadhaar and Other Laws Amendment Act 2019 and the Aadhaar Pricing of Aadhaar Authentication Services Regulations of 2019. Both of them, they allowed the use of Aadhaar by the private telecom organizations, by the private entities, but only voluntarily. That means they allow voluntary use of Aadhaar as a proof of identity for opening a bank account, for example, and getting a SIM connection. This allows the private companies to use Aadhaar as a valid KYC document, know your customer document. And now the petitioners in this case, what they are arguing, they're alleging that through these 2 laws, private companies can access the personal data of the citizens of this country. And this is violation of the Supreme Court verdict in the Aadhaar case. Now what the Supreme Court has done, it has sought the reply of the government to these petitions filed against these Aadhaar rules. That is what you need to know from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another newspaper article on page number 8. TRS MLA Citizenship High Court grants interim stay. Mr. Ramesh is a TRS MLA. He went abroad to Germany to pursue education and then he acquired the citizenship of Germany. India does not recognize dual citizenship. And that is how he had to renounce his Indian citizenship because he acquired the citizenship of Germany. Then he applied for Indian citizenship in the year 2008 and he was accorded Indian citizenship in the year 2009. Then one of the politicians approached the authorities and said his citizenship should be cancelled. Why? Because according to the rules, when in 2008 he applied for Indian citizenship, for 1 year before an individual applies for Indian citizenship, this individual should not travel abroad. That means today, for example, you are applying for Indian citizenship. Prior to your application, for 1 year, you should not have left this country. But according to the complaint, Mr. Ramesh had traveled to Germany during that 1 year period as well. That means he gave wrong information, concealing the fact that he had traveled abroad 1 year before applying for the citizenship of India. And then what happened? His citizenship was deprived. But then Mr. Ramesh approached the High Court of Telangana. The High Court granted him relief in July 2019, asking the Ministry of Home Affairs that you should reconsider your decision. But then again, a decision was taken by the MHA and his citizenship was deprived. Now he has again approached the High Court. High Court has granted an interim stay on the decision of the center depriving citizenship of MLA Mr. Ramesh. What are the things that you need to understand from this newspaper article? Is that number one, under Article 11 of the Constitution of India, Constitution has given unfractured power to the Parliament that you can regulate all matters related to citizenship. And that is how in 1955, citizenship law was enacted by the Indian Parliament, Indian Citizenship Act of 1955. And there are 3 ways in which an individual citizen can lose his Indian citizenship. Number 1, through renunciation. What is renunciation? I am an Indian citizen. If I travel to another country and acquire the citizenship of that country, I have to renounce Indian citizenship as well because dual citizenship is not allowed in this country. That means renunciation is a voluntary act wherein an Indian citizen, after acquiring the citizenship of another country, voluntarily gives up his Indian citizenship. Second is termination. What is termination? Let's say, for example, there is an individual A. He traveled abroad to Germany and then acquired the citizenship of Germany. But he did not renounce his Indian citizenship. If the MHA, which is the sole authority in matters related to the citizenship, if MHA feels that this individual has acquired the citizenship of another country and he has not renounced his Indian citizenship, then what MHA can do? It can terminate the citizenship of this individual. And third way in which you can lose your Indian citizenship is through deprivation. And what is deprivation? If you have acquired Indian citizenship through fraud, through concealment of facts, if you have hidden some facts, if you are disloyal to the Constitution of India, your citizenship can be deprived. That is what you need to know from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 12. And there are 2 important things that you need to understand from this newspaper article. Number 1, when Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was assassinated in the year 1984, 1 year later in 1985, an SPG was set up, Special Protection Group, to provide protection to the Prime Minister. Few years later, former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was also assassinated. Then in 1991, the Narasimha Rao government, what it did, it amended these SPG rules to provide for SPG protection to former Prime Minister as well as the immediate family of the former Prime Ministers. That too for a period of 10 years, which can go even beyond a period of 10 years if there is a sufficient threat perception against the former Prime Minister or his immediate family. Now, according to this newspaper article, SPG bill is likely to be introduced in the winter session of the Indian Parliament so that former Prime Ministers and his kin are excluded from SPG protection, so that SPG is there to protect only the present Prime Minister. That's number one. Number two, this government is also planning to introduce a bill to merge two union territories of Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at some of the editorials and columns from today's newspaper. First up, the opacity around electoral bonds. Electoral bonds are again in the news. Why? According to newspaper reports, Reserve Bank of India as well as Election Commission of India was against these electoral bonds. Let's discuss what these electoral bonds are and what is the controversy surrounding electoral bonds. This topic we have covered previously as well, but for the sake of our new subscribers, let me briefly tell you what these electoral bonds are all about. Political parties in India need money so that they can propagate their ideology, so that they can communicate to the voters. They require money. There can be no two opinions on that. But the money available to the political parties should be clean. That means black money as much as possible should be eradicated, removed from our electoral system. For that, the government thought, let's bring in a reform so that only clean money is available as political party donations. How? A scheme was launched under which State Bank of India will issue bonds. What will be the value of these bonds? 1,000 rupees, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, up to a maximum of 1 crore. If you are an individual and if you want to donate money to a political party, what you can do, you can approach the State Bank of India and buy these electoral bonds. But you will have to buy these electoral bonds only through check or digital transaction. Cash is not allowed because cash is still viewed as black money. Cash is unaccounted money, but if you are paying money in the form of a check or through digital transaction, we can safely say that this is clean money. Because 100% it is clean money, because if it is paid through check or through digital transaction, that means it is accounted money. It is not unaccounted money or black money. And once you approach the State Bank of India, you can buy these bonds. And then you can deposit these bonds into the bank account of your favorite political party, and this bank account will be under the supervision of the Reserve Bank of India. But you can donate these bonds only into the bank account of that political party which has bagged at least 1% of votes in the previous election. That means only those political parties which bag more than 1% of the total votes in the previous election, only those parties are eligible to receive donations via these electoral bonds. That means one objective of the government has now been realized, because the money that is donated to a political party is clean money. It is not black money. It is not unaccounted money. But then the good part ends here. And now the controversial aspects of electoral bonds begin. How? When this individual buys these electoral bonds, then deposits these bonds into the bank account of a political party, the political party has 15 days to encash this electoral bond. Clear? But then this bond is a bearer bond. That means nobody knows who donated to which political party. This entire donation is anonymous. Now you might ask, what is the problem with anonymity? The government says we need these bonds to be anonymous because we want people or institutions or organizations to donate freely to their political parties without any threat that the government will punish them. That means if I want to donate money to the opposition, nobody should come to know that I am donating money to the opposition, so that I am not victimized by the government. That is why the government says we are making these donations anonymous. But here is where the problem lies. Let's say, for example, I am an environmentalist. I believe in environmental conservation, preservation. And then for that, I believe that the right political party to rule this country is A, because prima facie, A also believes in environmental preservation, environmental conservation. But there is a corporate entity which is the biggest polluter of an environment. This corporate entity buys an electoral bond and donates this bond to this political party A. There will be quid pro quo. That means tomorrow when this political party will form the government, it will favor this corporate entity, because this corporate entity will tell this political party that I have donated 10 crores or 20 crores into your bank account. So ultimately, this political party might favor this corporate entity who is a polluter of the environment. And this is where I should not be voting for the party A, but I don't know who is donating to whom. That means this entire anonymity surrounding these electoral bonds, it leads to opacity in our electoral system, and it is not good for the health of our democratic polity. Now there is another problem with these electoral bonds. Let's say, for example, this is State Bank of India and this is Reserve Bank of India. I am approaching State Bank of India for an electoral bond. I buy these electoral bonds and deposit into the bank account of a political party X, and now RBI knows about this, that some amount of money has been deposited into the bank account of this political party X. In all of this, if there is one beneficiary, it is the government at the center. How? Let's say, for example, there is a corporate group A and it wants to donate money to an opposition political party Y. This corporate entity approaches the State Bank of India and buys an electoral bond worth 1 crore rupees and then deposits this electoral bond into the bank account of the opposition political party, and this bank account is under the supervision of RBI. The government, according to the newspaper reports, according to anecdotes, it has control over SBI as well as RBI, because many people today allege that there are no institutions left in this country which are working independently, which are working autonomously. That means government will come to know through SBI that this corporate entity has bought a bond of 1 crore rupees, and then this 1 crore donation was deposited into the bank account of an opposition political party. And then what will happen? The government of the day will unleash Enforcement Directorate, CBI, Intelligence Bureau and other agencies against this corporate entity. And then what will happen? They will be forced not to donate money to the opposition political parties, but only to the government. That is why a majority of the donations raised by political parties through these electoral bonds, majority of them went to the political party in power at the center. But there are three important things that we need to understand. Number one, according to recent reports, whenever an individual approaches SBI and buys these electoral bonds, there is a unique code given by SBI to all these bonds. And through these unique codes, the SBI as well as the government can track who has bought these bonds and who donated these bonds into the bank account of which political party. That means it is known to the government who is donating to whom. Number one. Number two, when I told you in the beginning that the party has 15 days to encash these bonds, even the expired electoral bonds were allowed by the government to be encashed. That's another problem with these electoral bonds. And on top of that, if there is a scheme which is completely opaque, which completely lacks transparency, which is completely anonymous, and which favors the government of the day. Government of the day can be any political party. Today it is BJP, tomorrow it can be Congress, day after it can be any other political party. But if there is a scheme for electoral funding which favors the political party in power at the center, then it violates free and fair elections. And free and fair elections, according to the Supreme Court, is part of the basic structure of Indian Constitution. There is another criticism, and the criticism is judicial evasion. This matter is pending before the Supreme Court for close to 2 years now. After that, multiple state elections were held. Lok Sabha election of 2019 was also held. But Supreme Court is not acting on this matter, is not ruling whether electoral bonds is legal or illegal, constitutional or unconstitutional. That is why some experts say it is through this judicial evasion, where judiciary is evading decisions on a particular matter, that judiciary is legalizing such schemes in this country and which violates free and fair elections in this country. That is what you need to understand from this topic, electoral bonds. Now let's look at another newspaper editorial, Occupation Rewards. Israeli-Palestinian conflict primarily is a conflict of two religions, Islam and Judaism, or between Muslims and Jews. Let's not go too far back in time, but let's travel to early 1900. If we look at this picture, this is the map of the Middle East. This area was under the Ottoman Empire for centuries. The area was diverse with Muslims, Christians and small number of Jews who lived generally in peace. This was, however, changing. How? There was a developing feeling of ethnicity. For example, Palestinian ethnicity. Same time, more and more Jews were joining the movement called Zionism. Zionism is a movement which says that Judaism was not just a religion but a nationality, one that deserved a nation of its own. Jews were facing atrocities in Europe, and Zionism felt that their only way of ensuring safety was if Jews have a separate country of their own. And Jews sought homeland in Middle East as their best hope of safety. In the first decade of the 20th century, tens and thousands of European Jews migrated to the Middle East. Then came World War I. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. British and French Empire, what they did, they reorganized the Middle East. British took the control of Palestine. British then allowed Jewish immigration, and when more and more Jews arrived, tension started between Arabs and Jews. Both sides committed acts of violence against each other. But then in 1930s, British decided, now let's limit Jewish migration. And then Jews decided to organize themselves and fight against both Arabs as well as the British Empire. Then came the Holocaust. During the Second World War, where Jews were killed, horrific acts of violence was committed against them. The result, more and more Jews moved to the British Palestine. And then there were demands for a state, for a country for Jews. When the World War was over, in 1947, UN approved a plan to divide Palestine into two states, the green part Palestine and the white part Israel. Jerusalem, which is a sacred place for Muslims, Christians as well as Jews. According to this United Nations plan, Jerusalem was supposed to be a special international zone. Jews accepted this formula and declared an independent state of Israel. But Arabs in the entire region saw this UN plan as another form of European colonialism. When the Second World War was over, many Arab states in the region, they also won their independence. And then there was an Arab-Israeli war of 1948-49. Israel won this war, and in the process, Israel extended its territory. Now look at green, a very small portion. Bulk of this portion is now controlled by Israel. Because of this war, large number of Palestinians, they were also expelled from their lands, and it created a massive refugee population. And on top of that, Gaza was controlled by Egypt. West Bank was controlled by Jordan. This is where the West Bank is. And everything else in green was controlled by Palestine, and in white it is the Israeli territory. In 1967, there was a 6-day war between Israel and the neighboring Arab states. And when it ended, Israel seized Golan Heights from Syria, Israel seized West Bank from Jordan, Gaza as well as Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Israel was now occupying Jerusalem as well. And in 1978, what happened? There was a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. This accord is known as Camp David Accord. This accord was signed between Israel and Egypt at the instance of United States. And what happened? Israel handed over Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt, but did not hand over Gaza. Gaza was still captured by Israel. Other Arab states also accepted the reality, they accepted the power of Israel. And now it turns out that the entire conflict of Arab-Israel is now transforming itself into Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because Israel is now occupying West Bank as well, Israel is occupying Gaza as well, because both these were part of the Palestinian state. Then Palestinian Liberation Organization was set up in 1960s by Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat fought against Israel. Initially, Palestinian Liberation Organization wanted to end Israel. They wanted that entire British Palestine should be given to Palestine. But PLO later on accepted the reality and accepted a two-state solution. That Israel and Palestine, they can reside side by side, but our land should be handed over back to us. That means we will go back to the United Nations Partition Plan of 1947. After this, something else happened. And what happened? In a dramatic development, Israel now sent its people, its citizens into the West Bank as well as in Gaza. That means settlers were introduced inside West Bank as well as Gaza, which is against the international law. Because according to the 4th Geneva Convention, an occupying power shall not transfer part of its civilian population into the territory it occupies. Now something has changed. The policy of United States President Donald Trump. Donald Trump accepted Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. United Nations General Assembly, Security Council, International Court of Justice, they have all said that introduction of settlers into West Bank and Gaza is against the international law. But now Donald Trump has justified these settlements as well. That is what this editorial is all about. Occupation rewards. Israel's defiance of international opinion on West Bank settlements is finding US support, and it will be the final nail in the coffin of the two-state solution. That is what you need to understand from this editorial. Let's look at the prelims-based questions. Number 1. Which of the following are correct regarding Human Capital Index? It was released by the World Bank as part of the World Development Report 2019. Correct. It sought to measure the amount of human capital that a child born today can expect to attain by age 18. Correct. India was ranked 115th among 157 countries in first ever Human Capital Index. All the statements are correct. So D is the correct response. Which of the following are correct regarding Govt Yojana? This scheme is being implemented as part of Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin. Correct. This initiative supports biodegradable waste recovery and conversion of waste into resources. Both these statements are correct. If you look at biogas, biogas is the most common form of biofuel. And biogas is also a clean form of energy. And this biogas can be obtained from cattle dung. It can be obtained from poultry dropping, from crop residue, from kitchen waste. According to this Govt Yojana, which was implemented, announced in February 2018, launched in February 2018, the government is authorized to collect this waste and then convert this waste into resources such as biogas. This will provide economic benefit to the people, and it will also realize the objective of Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin. That means both the statements are correct. Let's look at another question. In 2018, India signed a deal known as Action Plan for Prioritization and Implementation of Cooperation Areas in the Nuclear Field. With which of the following countries? It was Russia when Vladimir Putin was in India. Let's look at previous year's prelims-based question 2019. In the context of wearable technology, which of the following tasks is or are accomplished by wearable devices? Location identification of a person, correct. Sleep monitoring of a person, yes. Assisting the hearing impaired person, yes. All the statements are correct. Let's look at the mains based question. Answer should be in not more than 200 words. India cannot forever fund its democracy with the proceeds of corruption, money taken off the books of companies and funneled to parties in wholly opaque ways. Such funding corrupts politics and makes the economy non-competitive. Elaborate. And it is in response to our discussion on the electoral bonds. That is it from our newspaper analysis for today. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.